It was 6:47 in the morning when my phone buzzed on the nightstand. I remember the exact time because I'd been awake since 5. Couldn't sleep, just lying there staring at the ceiling fan going around and around. I almost didn't pick up. I thought it was a spam call. It was my neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, from across the street. "Honey, I think there's someone sitting on your front steps. An older woman. She's been there a while." I was out the door in 30 seconds. My grandfather was 81 years old and had a bad hip. He'd had a replacement 2 years ago, and in cold weather, it was 41 degrees that morning, mid-November in Columbus, Ohio. He walked slow and his hand shook a little. When I came around the side of the house and saw him sitting on my porch steps with 2 bags at his feet, one of them a black trash bag tied at the top, I felt something drop in my chest like a stone. He looked up when he heard me coming. He had this expression on his face. I don't know how to describe it exactly, except to say it was the face of someone who was trying very hard not to need anything from you. Like he was already apologizing before I even got there. "Grandpa." I crouched down in front of him. His hands were cold. I could feel it when I grabbed them. "How long have you been out here?" "Not long," he said. He looked away from me, toward the street. I didn't want to ring the bell so early. His former neighbor, later told me he'd been sitting there for at least 40 minutes. I got him inside, got him into the armchair by the heating vent, made him tea. He didn't say much for a long time. I sat on the ottoman in front of him and waited. I knew better than to push him. My grandfather is not a man who talks easily about hard things. He grew up in a farmhouse in rural Indiana with 4 brothers, and a father who thought crying was for funerals only. You wait him out. You give him time. Finally, he said, "Your uncle said he needed the room." That was it. That was the whole explanation. My uncle, my mom's older brother, Marcus, had been living with my grandfather for almost 3 years by that point. That part had always been sold to the family as a kindness. Marcus had gone through a divorce, lost his job, needed somewhere to get back on his feet. My grandfather, who had a 3-bedroom house in Westerville that he'd owned free and clear since 1987, said, of course, "Come stay. Family takes care of family." I'd had my doubts from the beginning, but I kept them to myself. Marcus and I had never been close. He was the kind of person who made everything about himself without ever appearing to. Very smooth about it. Very practiced. He'd bring my grandfather to family dinners and make a big show of it. Look at me taking care of Dad, and everyone would nod appreciatively, and I'd sit there with my mouth shut, because what was I supposed to say? He seemed fine. My grandfather seemed fine? I should have asked more questions. The tea got cold while my grandfather talked. It came out slowly, in pieces, the way things do when someone's been carrying them alone for a long time. Marcus had been asking him to sign things. Financial things. At first it was small. A shared account so Marcus could help manage the bills, pay things online, make it easier. My grandfather is not comfortable with computers. That made sense, or seemed to. Then it was a car loan. Marcus needed a vehicle for a new job, just needed my grandfather's name on it. He'd make all the payments himself. Then there was something about a home equity line of credit. My grandfather didn't fully understand what he'd signed. He's sharp. I want to be clear about that. He's sharp. He remembers everything, tells the same 4 jokes every Thanksgiving with perfect timing. But he trusted Marcus, and Marcus knew exactly how to use that. "How much?" I asked. My grandfather looked at his hands. "I'm not sure exactly. Ballpark." He was quiet for a moment. "Marcus said there was about 11,000 left. Left out of what?" He didn't answer right away. I waited. "I had a little over 140,000 in savings," he said, "from selling the business, from your grandmother's life insurance." I didn't say anything. I couldn't. My grandmother had died 7 years ago. She'd been meticulous her whole life, careful with money, always putting something aside. She used to tell me, "You save not for yourself, but for the ones who come after you." That money was 40 years of her life, and Marcus had burned through almost all of it in under 3 years. I got up and went to the kitchen. I stood at the sink for a minute with the water running and just breathed. I needed to get my face right before I went back in there, because my grandfather didn't need to see me fall apart. He needed to see me be steady. I'm a paralegal. I've worked at a family law firm in Dublin, Ohio for 4 years. I know what elder financial abuse looks like on paper. I've typed up enough affidavits to know the pattern, but knowing something professionally and watching it happen to your own family are two completely different things. When I went back to the living room, I sat down and I asked my grandfather if I could look at his bank statements. He said yes. He had them in a manila envelope in one of his bags, the actual bags, the ones Marcus had helped him pack that morning. He'd packed them the night before, my grandfather said. Marcus had told him he was moving him to a senior living facility in Gahana, said it would be better for him, said he'd already handled the arrangements. My grandfather had asked if he could think about it. Marcus said there wasn't really time, that the room was available now and might not be later. He'd said it casually, like it wasn't a big deal. Like he wasn't shipping his father off to a facility at 72 hours' notice without telling a single other person in the family. He'd dropped my grandfather at my house because my grandfather asked to say goodbye. Marcus hadn't even come to the door. I spent that afternoon going through 3 years of bank statements. My hands were shaking by page 4. The transfers were brazen once you knew to look for them. Thousands at a time moved into an account I didn't recognize. I later found out it was a personal account in Marcus's name alone. There were cash withdrawals my grandfather had no memory of making. The car loan was real, a 2022 truck, fully financed in my grandfather's name, and Marcus had stopped making payments 8 months ago. There was a home equity line of credit opened 18 months prior for $60,000. The balance remaining was $4,000. My grandfather's name was on all of it. His credit, his collateral, his retirement. Marcus had been using him like a cash machine for 3 years, and now that the well was mostly dry, he was done. I called my mom that night. She didn't believe me at first. I read her the numbers. There was a long silence. Maybe there's an explanation, she said. I didn't argue with her. I just told her I was taking Grandpa to my attorney friend the next morning, and if she wanted to come, she was welcome. She didn't come. The attorney, a woman I'd gone to school with, now practicing elder law, listened to everything, looked at the documents, and used the words elder financial exploitation within the first 15 minutes. In Ohio, that's a crime. It falls under the Adult Protective Services statutes, and depending on the amounts involved, it can be a felony. She told me to file a report with the Ohio Adult Protective Services hotline and to contact the county prosecutor's office. She told me to freeze what was left in the accounts immediately and to contact the bank about the unauthorized transfers. I did all of it that afternoon. Here's the thing about taking legal action against your own family. Everyone acts like you're the one doing something wrong. My mom called me 3 more times that week. My aunt Marcus's ex-wife, ironically, sent me a Facebook message saying I was tearing the family apart. 2 cousins stopped talking to me. My grandfather's sister, who is 84 and gets most of her information third hand, left me a voicemail that started with, "I heard what you did to Marcus," and I had to put the phone down before I finished listening to it. Marcus himself called me exactly once. It was a Sunday evening, 2 weeks after my grandfather moved in with me. I was making dinner, and my grandfather was watching Jeopardy in the next room, and I picked up because I figured I should hear what he had to say. He was calm. That was the thing that got me. He was completely calm. He said he understood I was upset, that I might not have the full picture, that a lot of what had happened was complicated, and that Grandpa sometimes got confused about financial things. I had my phone set to record. I always record calls I think might matter. It's legal in Ohio as long as one party consents, and I was one party. I let him talk. He said my grandfather had agreed to everything, that he had documentation, that I was making accusations I couldn't support. He said maybe we should all sit down together and talk it through like adults. He said, and I want to be precise here, I've given up 3 years of my life for that man, and nobody in this family has ever once acknowledged it. I said, I appreciate you explaining your perspective. I want you to know that we've already filed reports with Adult Protective Services and the county prosecutor's office, and that my grandfather's attorney has sent preservation letters to the bank. If you had documentation showing consent for the transfers, you should probably share that with your own attorney. He hung up. The investigation took 4 months. I want to be honest about what that was like, because nobody tells you the unsexy middle part of these stories. It's not dramatic, it's exhausting. It's form after form, callback after callback, explaining the same timeline to four different people, watching your grandfather get quieter and more ashamed even though none of it was his fault, trying to keep him from feeling like a burden while he's sleeping in your guest room, and you're reorganizing your whole life around his schedule and his medications and making sure the bathroom rub doesn't slip. He has a doctor's appointment every 3 weeks for his hip and a follow-up with his cardiologist every 6. He takes 5 medications, and they all have to be taken at different times. He likes his coffee with exactly 1.5 spoons of sugar, and he will not tell you this. He will just drink the coffee without comment, so you have to figure it out yourself. He watches the Weather Channel every morning for 20 minutes, even though we both have smartphones. He leaves the light on in the hall at night, and I learned not to turn it off. I learned a lot of things in those 4 months. The prosecutor's office eventually charged Marcus with 1 count of theft from an elderly person and 1 count of identity fraud, both felonies under Ohio law. The car loan was a significant piece of evidence. He'd used my grandfather's information to secure a vehicle and then defaulted on it, which tanked my grandfather's credit score by over 100 points. The unauthorized account transfers totaled just over $94,000 across 3 years. The home equity line was trickier because my grandfather had technically signed the paperwork, but the elder law attorney successfully argued diminished consent. My grandfather had not been given adequate time or explanation to understand what he was agreeing to, and the proceeds had gone entirely to Marcus. Civil recovery proceedings started at the same time. My grandfather is not going to get all of his money back. That's the reality, and I don't want to sugarcoat it. Marcus doesn't have $94,000 sitting somewhere. He spent it, but the civil judgment is on record, and it will follow him. The truck was repossessed, and the deficiency is his. The HELOC balance is being disputed in court. My grandfather's credit we are working on repairing. Through all of this, my mom stayed on the sidelines. She came to one family meeting, said very little, left early. I understood it on some level. Marcus is her brother. She'd known him her whole life. It's hard to accept that someone you grew up with is capable of something like this. I didn't push her. I just kept doing what needed to be done. 5 months after my grandfather moved in, she called me on a Tuesday night. I was doing dishes. She asked how he was doing. We talked for almost an hour. Really talked, the way we hadn't in a long time. She cried a little. She said she was sorry she hadn't come sooner. She didn't say sorry for doubting me exactly, but I heard it underneath the other things she said, and I accepted it. That's all I needed. My grandfather is still with me. We converted the guest room, painted it, got him a real dresser instead of the folding one, let him put up his framed photo of the 1987 Indiana Pacers. Even though it's enormous and slightly crooked no matter what we do. He's been to every one of my nephew's baseball games this spring. He taught my neighbor's kid how to play chess on a Saturday afternoon in March and came back inside looking more like himself than he had in months. Last week I was doing laundry and I found a note he'd left on the kitchen counter. It said, "Picked up your dry cleaning." Left it on the hook by the door. Darn. I stood there for a second, just holding that note. He's never going to say thank you in any kind of direct way. That's not who he is. But he leaves me notes. He refills the dish soap before I notice it's low. He learned which nights I work late and makes sure there's something easy left out for me to eat. He asks about my cases, not the details, just general. How'd it go? Was it a hard day? And he listens to the answer. That is his thank you. I know that now. Marcus's case goes to plea or trial this fall. His attorney has been talking to the prosecutor about a deal. I don't know what the outcome will be. I hope it's something my grandfather can feel some peace about, whatever that looks like. I'm not spending a lot of energy hoping Marcus suffers specifically. I spent some time wanting that early on, and it didn't feel good and it didn't help anything. What I want is for it to be acknowledged, officially, on record, with consequences. That he took from someone who trusted him, that what he called helping was taking. That the 3 years he talked about sacrificing were actually 3 years he spent someone else's savings. He called me one more time 3 months ago. I don't know what he expected. I let it go to voicemail. He didn't leave a message. My grandfather doesn't know about that call. There's no reason he needs to. What he does know is that this is his home for as long as he wants it. I told him that on a Sunday morning in December, sitting at the kitchen table, both of us with our coffee, his with 1.5 spoons of sugar, which I have now perfected. And he nodded and looked at his cup and said, I know. He said it like he'd known it for a while. Maybe he had. Maybe that's why, out of everywhere he could have gone that cold November morning, he ended up on my steps. I've thought a lot about what made the difference. Not in a big dramatic way, just quietly, in the car, doing dishes, those odd minutes when your brain goes somewhere on its own. And what I keep coming back to is this: the people who take advantage of others almost always count on two things. They count on your loyalty and they count on your silence. Marcus counted on both. He counted on my grandfather being too proud and too trusting to say anything. He counted on the family being too uncomfortable to look directly at what was happening. He counted on me being too busy or too polite or too uncertain to make the call. He was wrong about all of it, but only barely. There were so many moments where I almost didn't push further. Almost let it go, almost told myself it wasn't my place. That's the thing nobody talks about when these stories get told. How close it comes to going the other way. How much easier it would have been to do nothing. My grandfather spent 81 years being a decent person. He worked his business for 3 decades, paid his taxes, raised his kids, took care of my grandmother through her illness without a single complaint anyone ever heard. He saved carefully because that's what people of his generation did. You saved for when you couldn't work anymore and for the people after you. That savings represented real time, real choices he made, real things he gave up along the way. Marcus understood the value of it perfectly. He just didn't think he had any obligation to respect it. What I've come to understand is that character reveals itself under pressure, not in the easy moments. Marcus was charming and functional and perfectly pleasant when there was nothing at stake. It was only when he had access to something valuable that you saw what he actually was. That's true of a lot of people. The test isn't how someone behaves when life is easy. The test is what they do when they think nobody's watching, and nothing will stop them. My grandfather passed that test his whole life. Marcus failed it the moment the opportunity appeared. I think about the version of this story where I'm not a paralegal, where I don't know what a preservation letter is, or how to read a transfer history, or who to call at the county prosecutor's office. I think about all the families where there's no one with that specific combination of knowledge and proximity and stubbornness. Those families exist. They're common, and the Marcus of their story just gets away with it. That's not a comfortable thought, but I think it's an honest one, and I'd rather sit with it than look away. What I want to say, and I mean this plainly, not as some grand conclusion, is that paying attention to the people you love is not a small thing. Calling. Asking real questions, not just how are you, good. Looking at someone's face and noticing when something has shifted. My grandfather would never have called me. He never would have said, something is wrong, I need help. That's not who he is, and that's not a flaw. It's just how he was made. It was on me to notice. I almost didn't. I got lucky. He got lucky. And I'm not going to pretend that luck was all skill or virtue on my part, because it wasn't. But what I did do, what I tell anyone to do, is this. When something feels wrong, don't wait for certainty before you act. You will almost never have certainty before you act. You will almost never have certainty before it matters. You act on what you can see, and you figure the rest out as you go. My grandfather leaves me notes on the kitchen counter now. He refills things before I notice they're low. He asks how my day went and actually listens to the answer. That's not nothing. That's not a small life. And it almost got taken from him by someone who was supposed to be family. I'm glad we caught it. I'm glad he's here. I'm glad I picked up the phone that Tuesday morning when Mrs. Peterson called. Everything came from that.